We are the Fantastic Four, and this is our presentation, Milestones of Diversity in American Education.
And admit that the waters around you have grown, and expect that it's so you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, well, you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changing.
Hi, my name is Heather and I'm a member of the team, the Fantastic Four. My milestone in American diversity and education is going to be the educational acts of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. In 1642, the first educational act in America was passed by the Massachusetts Bay Colony. This milestone event helped to form the educational system in America as we now know it. The Puritans of the colony had a strong religious belief that centered around learning the lessons of the Bible and living a virtuous and useful life. Settlers in the Massachusetts Bay Colony supported a commonwealth both at home and abroad. They felt that education was the responsibility of the community and that quality education would benefit all involved. This original act was followed by the Old Deluder Satan Act in 1647, named for the first line in the act. And then in 1648, another act was stated to reinstate the original act of 1642. The school law of 1642 made parents and masters accountable for the education of their charges. Families were required to instruct their children in the ways of the Bible through the reading of Scripture and training for meaningful employment. Both boys and girls were required to understand the fundamentals of reading, morality, and religious study. Families not fulfilling their duties would be subjected to the penalties outlined in the law. In 1647, the Commonwealth recognized that deficiencies in education continued to exist and began to require that towns provide community schools where young boys and girls could be educated. Each town, over 50 families, were required to provide a primary school that would serve the townspeople. Each town, over 100 families, would also be required to provide a grammar school for continuing education. Girls only went to school for a few years to learn the basic fundamentals, then spent the rest of their time at home learning from their mothers and other women in the family. Boys of wealth were able to attend grammar school, but however, boys of lower socioeconomic status were required to fulfill apprenticeships after their primary education. Each town that did not conform to the law were required to pay £5 annually until the project was completed. In the first decade after the 1647 law, all 8 of the 100 family towns and 1/3 of the 50 family towns had met the education requirements set forth in the law. The remaining 2/3 of the towns and newly forming towns chose to pay the £5 penalty. Community leaders, however, felt that education was still a priority, and in 1660 a civil code was created that reinstated the laws of the Old Deluder Satan Act verbatim. The code also wanted to encourage further education of youth and appointed £400 to Harvard for the ordering and managing of the college.
Some writers and critics who prophesize with your hand.
Hi, it's Anita. The major milestone for the 18th century that I have chosen is the Franklin Academy. The Franklin Academy opens in Philadelphia. This is now known as the University of Penn. Benjamin Franklin wanted to create a learning environment that did not fit with the current role models of the New England and Virginia. The goal was to create a plan that would be the education of a business and governing class rather than the clergymen. Franklin's ideas were very receptive to the prominent men of Philadelphia who saw a need to prepare young men to lead the government and businesses in the growing city. Ben Franklin presented a paper on the academy in 1750. The Academy of the Charity School opened in 1751. In this paper on the academy, Ben Franklin proposed that the youth of Pennsylvania have an opportunity of receiving a good education without going abroad for it. and he felt that the number of poor will be able to receive an education to help in teaching children reading, writing, arithmetic, and grammar of their native language. Franklin knew there was a need to have a university or school in the States. He wanted the children to have a higher learning accessible to them. Franklin proposed to have classes taught in English rather than in Greek and Latin, and the curriculum would include useful subjects such as natural history, geology, and geography, and modern languages. Franklin's ideas were very important in shaping Penn as a unique institution. Franklin's concept was new in the mid-18th century Western world, but is what a liberal education has now become today. The students who attended the academy represented a variety of social, political, and economic backgrounds. Their diversity created a healthy classroom atmosphere. It also provided a democratic social exchange and encouraged the expression of individual talents. A large number of students came from homes from prominent trustees and faculty members. There were some students who came from respectable but less privileged backgrounds. Classes at the academy began on January 7, 1751, with only 17 students at the time. The charity school for boys opened in September 16, 1751, and the girls' branch for the charity school opened in 1753. During the 18th century enrollment, it was as high as 100 boys and about 40 girls. The girls also lived on campus with the boys, which created a co-ed environment.
And there's no telling who that it's naming. For the loser now will be later to win. For the times they are a-changing. Come senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall, for you get
Hi, I'm Matt.
served.
Today I'll be talking to you about the milestone in education during the 19th century. The milestone that I chose to research was the Massachusetts Attendance Act of 1852. This was the first general law attempting to control the conditions of children. Children in the ages of 8 through 14 were required to attend school in their city or town for at least 12 weeks. Now, 6 of these weeks had to be completed consecutively. At this time, if a child did not attend, their family would be fined no greater than $20, and the violators were prosecuted by the city. While it's extremely difficult for this fine to be enforced, it brought forth the importance of an education for the children of our nation. By 1918, all states had formally adopted compulsory attendance laws requiring school-aged children to attend.
Hello, my name is Brian and I did the 20th century. During this time there was a lot of things going on, from World War I to World War II and the Great Depression. And then, next thing you know, comes the Civil Rights Movement. This happened during the 1950s and the 1960s. There was a lot of change coming, especially in education. I decided to do the Brown versus Board of Education. That was a big landmark case during this time. In 1951, Oliver Brown filed a lawsuit against the Topeka Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas, to catch the bus for school. But there was a school 7 blocks away from where he lived, but his daughter couldn't go there because it was an all-white school and his daughter was black, so he felt that was wrong. So he claimed that the Topeka racial segregation violated the Constitution Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment. That says that white schools have to be equal to black schools, or black schools have to be equal to white. So even though they're segregated, they both have to be the same funding and everything along those lines. But the federal district court dismissed his claim. They said that the schools were equal and they didn't see anything wrong with it, so they don't know why he was complaining about it. Well, Mr. Brown wasn't satisfied with that, so he appealed it, and in 1954, the Supreme Court heard it. And thanks to Chief Justice Earl Warren, the Supreme Court decided to desegregate schools. And it should be legal for black and white students to go to school together. And this was a very important case during the 20th century.
Hi, I'm Matt, and today I'll be talking to you about a milestone in education during the 21st century. The milestone that I chose to research was the No Child Left Behind Act, also known as NCLB. This was signed into law in January of 2001 and was implemented in 2002. It is described as the most significant change in federal regulation of public schools in 3 decades. NICB has set several important goals for our students as well as teachers. Number 1 is closing the achievement gap between subgroups of students. This includes minority students, students with special needs, students learning English as a second language, and white students. Number 2 is improving the quality of our teachers. How do we do this? By having districts hire teachers that are highly qualified. Number 3, for our students to be achieving 100% proficiency in mathematics and the English language by the year 2014. Number 4 was providing an adequate yearly progress, or AYP report, for all students in order to show the schools are improving and raising students' scores. To provide these AYPs, students would be tested yearly from 3rd grade through 8th, and then in high school, to see their progress from the following year. States and school districts would receive report cards on their performance, and depending on how well they did, could determine how much federal funding they would receive for the next year. This is the first Education Act that held school districts liable and got the ball rolling to start making the necessary changes to make progress in the hard work.